Welcome to the Woman Angler and Adventurer podcast, inspiring real women with a passion for fishing and the outdoors to go get their adventure on. Now, here's your fearless host, Angie Scott.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Woman Angler and Adventurer podcast, coming to you from the Lance Truck Camper mobile podcast studio. Woo-wee, what a journey. We're finally here. This is awesome. And I'm happy to bring you my first episode with two chicks in a boat, Beth and Lori. We're going to talk about tournament angling, bass fishing, and all sorts of things on this episode. So I can't wait for you to meet them if you're not familiar with who they are. But they were my guinea pigs for the first episode. Everything went great. It was awesome. So really excited about this new studio. I'm going to show you some videos of the interior and my setup and things like that as we get further into this thing. But as for now, just enjoy the very first episode from the Lance Truck Camper mobile podcast studio. Welcome to the Woman Angler and Adventurer podcast, the very first episode coming to you from the Lance Truck Camper mobile podcast studio, which is where I'm sitting. And I am with Beth and Lori, two chicks in a boat and you're in Ohio, right?
Yep. Westerville, Ohio, just outside of Columbus.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being my guinea pigs as the first guests from the studio. It's been a long time in the making. And speaking of that, our podcast episode has been a long time in the making because we had a couple tries. Yeah. I missed the first one on accident when I was down in Florida, and then the second one I couldn't find the cable I needed. It was just a mess. So
it was no problem.
Yeah, we're good.
You were out fishing, and I was like, I wish I was out fishing. Yeah, so it was no problem at all.
Yeah, well, I appreciate your patience, and I'm so glad that kind of, maybe it was destiny for you two to be my first guests on this. This has been, like I said, this has been such a long journey, but I'm so glad finally it's all coming together. So
we're happy to be here. We really appreciate the offer and the invite. We're excited.
Yeah, very excited.
Yeah, and I've been wanting to have you on the show for a long time because way back when I first started originally it was called It Pays to Fish, and then I transitioned it over into the Woman Angler and Adventurer. And not too long after that, I think a couple people now, it's been a while, I can't remember who, but recommended that I interview you on the show. So I'm glad it's finally happening.
Yeah, we're excited.
And now it's cool too because now I'm part of the LBAA, which you fish occasionally as well. So how long have you been fishing with the LBA?
So the first tournament we did was actually a birthday present. Beth gave me an entry into the tournament, and I was like, "What is this?" And she's like, "You're going to go as a boater," and I'm like, "Sweet," And then I was like, "I don't know what I'm doing," because we'd only been tournament fishing for 3 years at that time, So, and it was on Kentucky Lake. So we were familiar with that because we fished there with our guys, but not in our new boat. We were in a little 16.5 footer. And so now we're in a Ranger. So 2015 was the first one we did on Kentucky Lake. And then, just because of our schedule. And then actually they needed somebody. They needed a boater
in Tennessee.
Yeah.
At
Old Hickory. That's September. Was it September? Yeah, end of August, beginning of September, because they needed a co-angler, and was it the championship or something like that? I don't know. It was like their last tournament. So somebody called and invited and said, "Hey, can you come?" And I'm like, "Oh man!" And Beth was a trooper, and she's like, "We can do it." Literally left Thursday after work at 4:00. Got there at about 1:00 in the morning, and then turn around and got up at 3:30 in the morning, and then we had like a fog delay. I was like, oh, I could have slept in. So it kicked our butt. It kicked my butt. But it was fun. It was great. Never been on that water before.
And that was Old Hickory, you said?
Yeah, it's Old Hickory. Yeah,
It's my home turf.
Is it really?
Well,
Yeah.
I'm mostly on Percy Priest, but Old Hickory's not far.
Okay.
I've fished it a few times, but
Yeah. So then,
Very pretty down
oh,
there.
it's gorgeous.
Mhm.
But since then, we've only we weren't able to fish any last year because of our schedule, and then because of COVID as well. So we didn't make any trips last year. And then Beth, the one year, she took what place on Kentucky Lake in the wild card
Oh, yeah.
twice, didn't you?
Yeah, I played.
She cashed some checks
I did as a co-angler.
as co-angler.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think I placed 5th, I think, in the wild card, which put me in the classic.
Oh, cool.
I was able to qualify, and then in September, we went to Lake of the Ozarks.
Yeah, look at the
Yeah,
Mm.
Lake of the Ozarks.
Bull Shoals.
Oh yeah,
Bull
Oh,
Shoals.
yeah, Bull Shoals, yeah. I've been on that lake
So
before.
that was super exciting, and then I got I think 4th down there.
Nice.
And you got that trophy the one year. You got second place.
Oh, I did get
because
second,
it's a sweet trophy.
Yeah,
You
sorry,
were
I
with
was
Pam.
thinking.
She was with Pam Martin Wells, and co-anglers, only have to catch 3 fish, and us
Mhm.
boaters or pros have to catch 5, which is tough. And she ended up. I'm going to brag about you a little bit.
I
Is that
can
okay?
see this coming.
She ended up catching over 13 pounds, which no one in the
Wow.
tournament that day had caught over 13 pounds. So she had over 3 fish with 13 pounds. It was pretty awesome. I was pretty excited.
That's impressive. That's a good
Yeah.
day right there for
It
sure.
was fun. I think when Pam Martin Wells nets your fish and she says, "Wow, that's a good fish," I was like, "Okay, I think that might be an actual good fish out there."
And then
So,
Pam was very complimentary to you too. She was like, she took me to school, and then Beth saved a critical fish for her, making a diving lunge with the net. Beth is great with the net. She's really
Nice.
good. I'm not so good.
yeah,
But she's good with the net. And so it was cool though. But the thing that was so exciting is all these women love to fish.
Mhm. Yeah.
in as I don't know for you as a boater, but as a co-angler, you get to learn so much. Personally about different anglers, but you get to learn so much about fishing, and a lot of them have so much experience, compared to what we had at the time. So it was just a great opportunity to learn
Mhm.
and to sometimes, touch your own fish. Because
Mhm.
before, we were always fished as a team. So my job was to catch the fish and then swing it over to Lori and for her to take it off.
She wouldn't touch a fish.
Yeah. So when we first got into the LBAA, I was like, what am I going to do?
She's like, I'm not going to catch any fish. I'm just not going to catch any fish.
And it was great. It worked out well. I didn't. I was like, this is great. And then I had take the bait off and everything. And I was like, oh, this is going to be awful. Awful. No, it was great.
Now look at you.
Yeah, now she can take it off without too much trouble.
Yeah.
So was your first time taking a fish off during a tournament then, or?
So technically, so like as a kid, I would occasionally, but my dad always took them off for me. Not that I asked for it. And same with Lori, I didn't really ask for it, but she was
did so.
always,
She's like, please.
she was
take
right
it off.
there. As soon as I would catch it, she would just
Boy.
take it off for her. I was like, this is great. I don't need to do a whole lot of work right now. And then we were in a tournament one time and we both had fish on at the same time. So I had to take it off.
We
I
doubled.
was like, oh man. So I did it. I was a big girl then. And then in the tournament, I was like, Lori is nowhere near me. So then I really had to pull my big girl pants on and do it by myself. So.
Sometimes that's just the way we got to do it, like I've never been a boater in a tournament before, and I don't, have a ton of experience as a co-angler even. So this is, I'm just kind of jumping in with both feet and gonna do it. And
That's
sometimes the best.
It's the best, but I'll be honest with you. Sometimes, like, I wish I had spent a little bit of time as a co-angler just to learn a little bit more, because literally we only had 2 summers in of being tournament anglers when we entered the LBAA. It was just the beginning of our 3rd summer, and so everything we've learned from either watching YouTube or, going, we're like, oh my gosh, we've done Bass University. We would go to Cabela's and Bass Pro Shops and hear all of their speakers, Randy Howe, everybody. And we would take notes, like literally take notes.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'm like, I wish I had gone as a co-angler to get a little bit more feel. But also because we're going to do the Bass Open. And so we have to be co-anglers in that. And Beth is like, there's a different, fishing out of the back of the boat is totally different. And Beth is like, she's like, you're going to have a hard time, because she goes, you're going to want to drive, and you're going to want to find the spots. And she's like, you just can't. But it's also just a totally different type of fishing. A lot of times it's finesse and it's spinning rod, and I'm not real savvy with the spinning rod, but I'm going to learn.
Yeah. Lori's really good. I mean, she's excellent at driving the boat. That's our team right here. She drives the boat. I back it down. So I like it on land, and I like it to stop when I hit the brakes, and Lori's good on water. It doesn't always stop when you need it to stop on water.
Right.
Yeah, I can't back the boat down. So she does that, and then I drive on water. So I'm practicing.
Perfect team. It's good to switch it up and, get out of your comfort zone sometimes. That way, hopefully eventually both of you are good, at, still one might be better than the other, but at least you're, getting there anyway. So, you mentioned Bass University. So I signed up for that, and I've been watching, because I'm like, man, I have so much to learn. Like, I just, I have fished as a co-angler, and I have picked up a lot of good stuff, from the guys that I've fished with. But I'm like, still my learning curve is like, so I joined it over the winter, and I was like, I'm just going to start at the most basic level, even though I already, know a lot of this stuff, but I'm just going to like, maybe there's something I never really thought about or whatever. And so that's what I've been going through. But now I'm getting into some of the more advanced stuff and like technique specific stuff. And what struck me as funny is that you'll listen to one guy and you'll listen to another guy, and they'll say the exact opposite things. And it's just like, at that point, that's why I think there's value in just getting out there by yourself or with a friend, and just figuring it out, what works for you, because what works for one person, might not work for you because you have a slightly different style or whatever it may be. And so it can be really overwhelming to somebody who's learning when you go to a seminar and listen to one guy say, do it this way, never use this particular line for this technique or whatever. And then you hear somebody say the exact opposite, and you're like, what in the world? So what's your take on that?
So the funny thing is, like, we saw Bass University. We actually went to Louisville, Kentucky. And so we were able to see it in person, and it was great. We had a blast. We got to meet Ott Defoe, like a ton of really neat guys. And again, we took a ton of notes. But then it's like you said, for me, I have really bad ADD, and I'm doing pretty good so far focusing.
I'm so very proud of her.
I know it's bad because I'm like, look, do you see the face right here?
I know.
There is. But anyhow, so I have a tough time focusing. So some of that too is then how much do I remember from the Bass University and translate it into into my actual fishing. And for us, like, just the basic of line, you put your line on your own reel was like, we have videos from the very beginning where, like, for me, it's both of my hands in my mouth that I'm trying to see. It's a trip because I just couldn't do it. And so I started putting, like, a friend of ours said put mono on. Well, then, because guys can cast so far with their fluorocarbon and not get backlashes. When we first started, I started using braid on almost all of my line or all of my reels. And then I would put fluorocarbon on, because the braid I would use was always Power Pro, super slick. And I could cast it for days, and it was blue. And I remember this guy's like, man, you guys, you did really well in this tournament. What's on your reel? And he said, it's a different color. And so that was just trying to figure out. And then literally like 2 years later, you hear all these guys saying, well, they use braid to a fluorocarbon leader. And I was like, So I think you just, like you said, you just have to figure out what works for you and play around. So the reason I put braid on my reel was so that I could cast farther. I knew that I needed to be able to get crankbaits out further or whatever. And then I just played with the line size and the different techniques to do, if I'm pitching bushes, or buck brush, for sure it's straight braid. The other thing too that cracks me up is the guys are like, well, I've got 90-pound braid. I'm like, that's a rope. It's like a rope. And then there's 60-pound, and then I use this and this. And we just really, over the last 2 summers, really downsized. I did my line to where oftentimes I'm throwing 10-pound. And there's more sensitivity, you're getting more bites. You just have to play the fish a little bit longer,
Yeah. And I think going back to like when you're a co-angler, when I first started, I thought I needed to be doing what the pro was doing just to see if they were catching fish. And I thought, oh, well, I'm obviously going to need to do what they're doing. Well, I wasn't confident at anything they were doing. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. I can't keep doing this because I don't feel like I'm going to catch anything. So then once I backtracked, was like, Beth, if you just throw whatever you're confident in, I'm like, and just feel like you're going to, a gut feeling that you're going to catch fish. That's what I went back to. And so that's always helped me out, being a co-angler, or even when we're in tournaments, because you hear tons of guys or girls say that, oh, the bite's going to be this, and you're going to need to use this and this type of braid. And, get rid of your spinning rods because it's all going to be, flipping bushes or whatever. And it turns out to be like a little spinning rod shaky head.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you just need to do what you feel confident in, but it just takes a lot of practice to go out there and feel good about it.
It does. It's that confidence factor. And just like being a boater, when you're out on the water, and these guys are so good at their electronics. I mean, they are like, oh, this is this, and this is that, and this is this. And I'm like, I'm looking at I'm like, I don't even know what any of this is. I have no idea. And we're driving down the lake one time, and Beth is like, Lori, hey, there's an island right there. And I'm like, well, my thing tells me I'm supposed to go that way, my waypoint. And she's like, you might want to go around that island. I was like, okay. And granted, we're using a real small device. And so then I'm pushing on it, and we're on Kentucky Lake, and I'm hitting waves. And then I had a good plane over those waves, and then I just drop it off plane, and she stops and she goes, what is wrong? What happened? And I'm like, we're in Africa.
We zoomed it out so much.
So far, we're in Africa. And I was like, we're in South Africa to be exact. And she's like, oh, okay. And she didn't, and then couple tournaments later, she's driving down the lake and then comes off plane, and I'm like, where are we this time? Just back in Africa. So I think you just got to figure out what you're doing. One thing I would say though, and I think it's pretty consistent across the board, when we started, because our whole thing is when we teach and try to help people is we want you to be able to get into it economically, and we want you to be able to afford stuff to get in there. I will say that when it came to buying plastics, we bought every color there was in the store. Like I would go in for literally one bag of a plastic color, green pumpkin, and I would leave with $100 worth of worms. And Beth would be like, oh my God. And I'm like, I like this name. I mean, so that is the one thing I think across the board, whoever's presenting, they're going to tell you black and blue watermelon, or like black and blue, and then your green pumpkins, and then like your June bug or your watermelon or something with a little flake. That saved us a lot of money the last couple of years.
And occasionally there is that specific color that does work, and you may need it.
Yeah.
But you don't need all 98 other bags with it.
They're hanging in the garage right now.
Very colorful.
Yeah, that's great advice. It definitely can be overwhelming, and that to me, it's what you're confident with is what makes all the difference in the world. I've been in your shoes where I'm like, oh, okay, he's throwing a crankbait. I'm not, only caught like one fish on a crankbait before, but I'm gonna throw it,
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I've been there, but and then it's different too, because well, one challenge I've had as a co-angler is, I my biggest confident bait is just like a weightless Senko. If the conditions are right, it's not like super windy or whatever. Well, I can barely ever fish a weightless Senko during a tournament as a co-angler because they're running the boat way faster than you could
Yeah.
possibly fish that,
Yeah.
And so that's always a challenge as a co-angler is that, you have to kind of adjust what you're doing based on how fast they're fishing
Yeah.
and whatnot. So,
Yeah.
And
but
then you hope you don't get hung up.
yeah, that's the other thing.
You're like, oh no. And
out
you're,
of courtesy, I often try to kind of avoid those potential
Yes.
challenging things 'cause I don't want to bother them to have to.
exactly.
I remember one time somebody I took out, they got hung up, and I was like, it's no big deal. Like I went back, and they're like, you're gonna go back and get my bait. And it was a Kentucky lake, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go back and get your bait.
Yeah.
You're kidding me? And I'm like, no. And they're like, that is so nice of you. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, they're those spinner baits or whatever. They're expensive. I'm like, I'll go back and get it for you. And she's like, oh, she's super happy and really excited. And she goes, most people don't do that. I'm like, okay, well then I will be truthful. When it happened like the fifth time, I was
a little bit, yeah.
I was like, we're running out of time in this tournament, and I had been sitting in a good spot, and I still needed some fish, and I was like, can we let it go? So yeah, it was
Very nice.
So talk a little bit about fishing the opens. Have either of you fished any opens yet?
Mm-mm.
No.
Okay.
This is
We've done an ABA
open. Yeah, it was an ABA open after the women's tournament.
Yeah.
So we fished Thursday, Friday with the women on Kentucky Lake, and then Saturday morning we got up and fished individually in the ABA.
Yeah.
As an open. So I didn't like it very well at all. It was all drop shot. I don't know how to throw a drop shot. I'll be honest. I need practice. And yeah. And the kid was young, really young, and he was a local. So he knew the lake and he was on them. He was on the fish and he's catching them left and right. And then he left. And I was like, never leave fish. And so he left and he went down and he missed a big one out in front of a friend of ours' house on this flat. And then he was just mad the rest of the day. So then it got really rough, really, really rough. A lot of people out there, and the water was rough. It was a holiday weekend, so there were a lot of people out there driving around. And he went to go back to the spot, and the guys they were still sitting there that had been there in the morning, and they ended up winning the tournament. And I was like, you never leave fish to find fish, So you had a better experience. And then he drove like an idiot. Like he drove crazy fast because he was mad, and I get it, but I broke my neck a couple years ago. So I was having a tough time keeping in the seat, and I was more worried about my neck than anything, but yeah, he drove pretty crazy.
No, I had a good time. I mean, it got rougher towards the end of the tournament, but my guy was super cool. And speaking of a weightless Senko, that worked out well.
Nice.
I got a couple of fish, nothing any big, but I was like, hey, I didn't get skunked out here, and that weightless Senko does work.
Nice. So, Beth, when did things kind of turn for you when you first started fishing tournaments to where you started having some good success? Like, what do you think was the line? Or was there a line? Was it just
no? I think I just felt more confident in what I was doing for me. So I found that I was liking those weightless Senkos, but then I started using jigs, and I loved being able to, like, one of my favorite things is getting a really good jig, nice color, and pairing it with a trailer and making it super pretty, because I just love, and I'm like, it's going to catch some fish. And that's ended up what happened when we were on Kentucky Lake one time. But just having the success of being able to catch them, that was the biggest thing. And it was, for me, a good friend of ours made a homemade jig, And I just felt like it just has this personal connection with me, and I was able to catch fish with it. And because I feel like adaptable to whoever my pro might be, and I'm like, whatever you need to do, I'll do what I need to do. But it was once I started catching fish, being more confident in it and knowing, hey, you can do this. After I caught some, it kind of, pushed me over the line more. So now we could go anywhere and I can be a co-angler and I'll be comfortable as long as they drive like somewhat safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big thing, is feeling safe when you're out there too.
Yeah. And that's the thing that worries me too, is I don't always know, like in the beginning, I didn't know who she was riding with. And then I was like, do they know how to drive their boat in rough, wet, water? And like, I always try to tell my co-angler where my safety stuff is, in the event of an emergency, this is what you need to do. And I know that she can drive a boat. So I know that if something happens to her pro, she's safe and able to get back. But the other thing too is I think you were paired up with some really top anglers in the LBAA, and you learned a ton, because I'd be like, what'd you learn? What'd you learn? And she, she's like, I love casting. And,
I love there's sometimes where I stopped fishing so that I could observe what was happening in the front of the boat. I would try to watch them a little bit when they were driving, but I learned so much about different rods and different techniques and why they were fishing, a ledge or, a cut a certain way or a dock. To me, it was more important for me to watch them and learn so that I could get better than it was truly catching a fish at that time. So they just, and many of them were so very kind to even teach me a technique and let me, up in the front of the boat just to try it. And in different ways I could practice that technique, even back home. So it was a lot of just them being very kind and patient with a newcomer.
And showing stuff too.
Yeah.
Like Cheryl showed you some things.
Oh yeah, Cheryl.
Yeah, because she was with Cheryl a couple times.
Yeah,
Nice.
Cheryl would try to help teach me how to skip under a dock, and I don't know how many bird's nests I had, which is fine. It happens, but I'm telling you what, Cheryl can put that bait under a dock anywhere she wants, and one day I will grow up to be just like her.
Well, that's out. So where's your first open that you'll be fishing?
Okay, we're going to be on Lewis Smith Lake in Alabama, which the MLF, the Tackle Warehouse Series, Phoenix Tackle Warehouse Series is down there. Major League, they're there right now. So there you've got 4 days of fishing today. Well, I remember watching the top weight was like 16 or 17 pounds. So it's a spotted bass lake, largemouth, and it's really deep. It's 510 feet deep, and so I've been paying attention to the water and the water temp and the wind, and I write it down almost every day religiously, like I watch, and just to try to learn about the water where they are on the temp. But we'll be there. So this tournament's going off this week. It'll be over Sunday. And then we'll be there the 27th, but our tournament starts April 1st and 2nd.
Okay.
So we'll have like 3 days to pre-fish, look around. And it really doesn't matter where we go or what we do. We just have to find out the technique to work. So we're kind of excited about it. It's the only open we've ever done as far as like, this is Bassmaster.
Yeah.
Like this is like, the one time you did get interviewed on a stage with the NBA.
Oh my goodness. Well, my interview skills are slowly increasing with time here. But yeah, I got on stage and they were like, well, we're going to interview you. And I was like, oh, please don't.
And she's like, Laura, you talk. And because it was a team tournament. It was the National Bass Anglers Association.
And the guy would just keep talking in the mic, keep talking, and then occasionally throw it over to me like that. And I was like, well, I'm not ready. And then he's like, how's the weather in Ohio? Is it snowing up there? And I was like, yeah, lots of snow. Like that. It wasn't snowing.
There's no snow
in Ohio. It was clear and sunny and bright.
And I sat there and I looked at her and
I was like, please get me off this stage.
He's like, I heard they got snow up there. Yeah, a lot of snow. And I'm looking at her and I'm like, what? There's no snow.
Angie, there's lots of snow here. There's lots of snow here. There's no snow here.
We all have those stories, I'm sure.
Yeah. So I'm gonna try to be a little better.
Yeah.
If we, I just hope we catch something.
Hopefully, yeah.
Across the stage.
I'm gonna bring a fish across that stage.
Oh, listen to
there's
that.
Some confidence. And now, if you think about that, that helps too. Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna catch some fish.
Yeah. Positive mental attitude.
And maybe Trait Zildane will be my pro.
There you
Our
go.
buddy's fishing it, Charlie Hartley.
What's that?
Charlie Hartley's our buddy. We fish against him Tuesday nights up here.
From Ohio.
He's from Ohio. He was in the elites for many, many years, and actually was in the top finish of the Bassmaster Classic. He was leading it after, I think, 3 days, and then didn't get it on day 4. So he's going to be in there. So we're like, I would love to fish with Charlie.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
We're just excited.
Yeah, well, I would love to have you back on the show if possible when we are in North Carolina. Maybe we can do something in person.
That'd be cool.
Great.
That would be great, and then catch up and see how that went and all the other things, and talk a little bit more about how you maybe more of your background stuff that we didn't really touch on, and doing the seminars and things like that. I'd like to talk more about that. But
that's cool.
I really, really appreciate you coming on the show finally. And like I say, the first episode from the mobile podcast studio. This is the first episode I've done on this platform too. It's called StreamYard. Did you like it? I mean, everything.
It was
on your end?
Piece of cake.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So I just sent it from Messenger and I emailed her so we could set it up on this computer and not have it on our phone. And she was like,
yes. All you had to do was enter and put your name in there and you were good.
Perfect. Well, good,
Yeah, so
because
I'd
like to do more episodes like this as well, so I can put them up on YouTube. I was doing just audio episodes on YouTube for a while, just the same, whatever comes out on the podcast platform. But I'm like, nobody really sits on YouTube and listens to audio. Some people do. I did get a few, but
when you're driving, maybe
you want to have something to look at, or whatever. So I think doing more of these, putting more of these in the mix will be fun. And as long as I'm somewhere where I've got a decent Wi-Fi connection, which so for the audience, I'm literally like where my boat is. I'm like 3 parking lots over at the RV park doing this, testing out the camper and everything. And thankfully they have really good Wi-Fi here, so
that's cool.
It all worked out. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah,
we really appreciate
it. We greatly appreciate it. I'm curious as to how you get your backdrops up there with all your sponsors and stuff.
That's part of the StreamYard platform, so you can do these overlays, and had that built, months ago in preparation for doing this, and so I'm excited I finally get to use it. I do have to edit. One more sponsor came on board, Hellwig Suspension Products, for our truck.
Oh,
so
sweet!
I need to add their logo, but yeah, so very cool. Well, I'm glad it all went smoothly, and I'm gonna head out.
We'll see you in North Carolina.
Yes, I hope
get to check out your boat. And will the camper be there too?
That is the plan.
That's the plan. Okay. Awesome.
You could be my boater.
What's that? Oh, that's true.
You could be my boater.
That is very true. That could happen.
I mean, think about all the fish we're gonna bring in.
Oh man, it's gonna be insane. Like, I hope my live well's big enough. Actually.
I hope so.
Oh, it is. You'll be fine. And where's your first stop?
Rehoboth.
Oh yeah. Good luck.
Yeah, that's gonna be awesome.
I still don't have the boat. I still haven't put it in the water, used the electronics. So I'm hoping maybe first of next week it better be ready. I am registered as a co-angler, so worst case scenario, if it doesn't end up being ready, I'm still gonna go with the camper. We've got a place reserved down there, and I'll be a co-angler if it comes to that. But I'm on the bubble, so that could change, because if somebody drops out, then I might be out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I will say, if you're going with Garmin, you'll have no trouble learning how to use your Garmin.
It seemed so. The graph on the helm seemed very straightforward, very easy.
We switched to Garmin all last year, and the live scope, huge difference. Just like for us, getting the spot lock was a huge difference, and Garmin is just amazing.
Just don't forget to update your software on the Garmin.
Okay.
Good call.
Good tip. Thank you.
Yeah, get the bugs out.
Yeah.
All
Hey,
right.
thank you.
You ladies have a good night. I smell the campfire burning, so
Go get it, girl.
heat up
Awesome.
my dinner and go out there and enjoy some fire. And
There you go.
all
Have fun.
Yeah, thanks again, Angie.
Thanks,
right,
Angie.
thank you. I
Take care.
appreciate it.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, everyone, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this first ever episode from the Lance Truck Camper Mobile Podcast Studio. Thanks so much to Lance Truck Camper for coming on as a sponsor of this show, and I'm really looking forward to our partnership this year. Stay tuned for next week's episode, which is going to be coming to you from Lake Ray Hubbard, my first LBA tournament as a boater, as a pro, and fill you in on everything that went on with that. So looking forward to it. See you next week.